Gone fishing. One day, when Pops was still at school, his dad took him on a fishing competition. It was held on the River Stour, just south of Stratford upon Avon, where Pops was born. They had to start very early in the morning because great-granddad's Austin 7 got very annoyed if he tried to make it go any faster than 30 miles an hour. It would start wobbling its front wheels. The little windscreen wiper, just one, would start jumping up and down, and lots of very grey smoke would appear from under the bonnet. But Pops thought it just did that to show his dad that it could produce just as much smoke as his dad's pipe. His dad's pipe always won. There were about 20 men in the competition. Each one had a peg on the riverbank, and they couldn't fish anywhere else while the competition was in progress. Pops was the youngest in the competition, and his peg was next to the most experienced man in the competition. He even had little badges that he had won fishing pinned to his hat. The whistle blew for the start of the competition, and Pops put his favourite bait, 2 pinky maggots, on a number 14 hook. Lovely. "I'll show Badgeman next to me how to catch fish. Thinks he's the best, does he?" said Pops to his box of maggots. Pops was a very strange boy. "I'll cast out as far as I can, and then Mr. Badgeman will see what an expert caster I am." It was a very hot day. Pops was catching nothing, but Badgeman on the next peg seemed to be catching fish far too often for Pops's liking. Pops was still showing off with his long casts, but his neighbour was doing the opposite, just short casts every time, and making his float pop up just beside the lily pads that separated him and Pops. Eventually, Pops realised what was happening. Because it was a very hot day, the fish were sheltering under the shade of the lily pads, and not even Pops's juicy pinkies could entice them out of the cool shade. The whistle blew for the end of the competition, and the judges came down the line weighing the catches. Pops got his catch out, a couple of manky tiddlers, which hardly moved the scales. Next was Badgeman, plop, 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 plop. Loads of fish making the scales jump as if it had hiccups. Of course Badgeman won. "Why didn't you follow what I was doing and put your float next to your side of the lilies?" Badgeman asked Pops. Pops just shrugged and said, "Dunno," and walked away before he did something with the pinky maggots and Badgeman's hat. Pops just couldn't talk to grown-ups, especially when they were right, and he was wrong. He knew what was happening with the fish, but because of his stupid pride, he could not bring himself to change what he was doing, and because of that pride, he had no fish and had lost the competition, and Pops hated losing. It had been many years since Pops's last conversation with maggots, but he had never forgotten his stubbornness and the empty net. Now Pops knew if he was going to be a fisherman for Jesus and catch men for him, he would have to do it the Jesus way. The disciples fished all night and caught nothing, but as soon as they heard the Lord's voice and cast their nets on the right side of the boat, their nets were full. Pops was determined to turn his back on his foolish pride and stubbornness and discover the secrets that Jesus taught his disciples and those Christians down through history that became expert fishers of men. He read about George Fox, George Whitfield, John Wesley, Charles Finney, D.L. Moody, Hudson Taylor and many others, and he realised they had one thing in common. They had discovered the secret of prayer, and once they had discovered it, they prayed and prayed and prayed, and as they prayed, God changed them, so that they started living and fishing the Jesus way.